the Christians among us are probably in the minority, so that, I would really like them to be able to ask questions. There's plenty of atheists, so I'm sure there'll be enough of those. But just so that Mohammed, I think we might have to close that door. Otherwise, somebody's going to start dancing.
No one appreciates good music anymore.
After the talks, people are very welcome to go out on the dance floor. It's quite acceptable. So look, since Robert's our guest, perhaps an atheist might like to ask the first question to make Robert feel at home.
It's okay. They want to make you feel at home. Very happy to answer any questions about it.
What about the God of infinite regression? Who created God? Yes.
So who created God?
Yes. God is this God you talk about is an immensely complex way to do what you say he has done.
There's
nothing from nothing.
There's two responses.
Back.
In many ways, well, you've got an infinite regress either way you go. You've either got to, because I think this is what Aristotle was talking about in terms of an unmoved mover. That why do we go to ground our reality or everything in? We either have an eternal universe or an eternal God. I think they're probably realistically the only two options that we have. Otherwise, you're always going to ask the prior question, well, who created X, who created Y? So in the end, I think the end result moves into something eternal. Now, because modern science tells us that the universe had a beginning, I think we can rule out the eternal universe concept. So I think that leaves us, well, actually reasonably, with the idea of eternal God. And I think God, in many ways, by definition, is eternal. He's timeless. He exists outside of our kind of conception of reality. He's uncreated, that's the point. It's eternal, that's the nature of what it means to have something eternal. So by being eternal, he's uncreated. And so that's the understanding of, that's the classical understanding of God. Now, that's who God is.
But that's your faith.
No, as I said, we could regress. There's two points of regress. There's 2 points of regress. We can always go effectively. I think we can argue for an eternal universe or an eternal creator. Sorry, you can't do creator, but it's eternal. An eternal universe or an eternal reality or an eternal God that you create. I think they're really the only two options you have. So if you want to go to the multiverse, for example, people talk about the eternal multiverse, but in some ways you're actually invoking, you may as well invoke God. It's kind of the same thing really, this eternal thing that exists outside of our universe, which can kind of create. So in many ways that's a few hands going on now. Great.
Sorry, just...
that I think is the... Yeah. Sorry, yeah.
That's good. You don't hear.
And do we...
I think the answer possibly hasn't satisfied, but I think that's the explanation that I can give.
Do we do a piggybacking?
Just before the next question,
I'm happy to
just give Raphael a turn.
It's an interesting question and an interesting answer because Robert's talking about, he's trying to rule out the idea of the eternal universe. Now, no, the cosmologists don't actually agree that the universe is not eternal. It's something that we don't know. But just consider the irony of this situation that we're basically saying, okay, here's the universe, we're saying it's not eternal, we know the universe exists. Here's this other thing that we don't know exists, we'll call that God, that's eternal. That doesn't really make a convincing argument. We don't know that God exists, so we can't know that God's eternal, and we actually don't know that the universe isn't eternal either. It's still a live option.
We'll just take Anita's question. Yes, next.
You base a lot of your argument
It's Robert. That's right, that's okay.
You based a lot of your argument on the fact that the early Jews were monotheistic.
That's right.
Now, as far as I can recall, in Carl Sagan and Stephen Hunter's world, the early Jews actually had many little gods, like household gods and what have you, and they were compelled to give these away because a new thought came along that there was only one. So what you were saying was actually wrong. It was quite conceivable that they had a notion of many different gods.
So I'm a bit confused. So at what point in history were these Jews worshipping other gods?
Well, I'm pretty sure it was in some of my reading. I think it was the Stephen Porter. Have you read that?
Which one, sir?
Carl Sagan and Stephen Porter.
No, I haven't read that.
Anyway, it was in some of my reading. It was, if you go far enough back to the early Jews, they actually were not monotheistic. They had many different gods. They had household gods. They had spirits that were, pertained to different things around the household. So you're coming from something saying, well, how could this possibly happen? Well, it did. It did happen, and they did have a nation of sort of polytheistic nation.
I think what potentially could be referring to is there were certain periods of history in the ancient world, in the ancient Near Eastern world, where the Jews were worshipping other idols, other gods, but that was kind of the reason that they were judged, or that the Jewish conception was that there is one God. All the others, so it's like that little Ganesh, you may as well use it because there's $15 on it today. So I want to try to get a bit of value out of it. So the whole Jewish conception was built around there is only one God who communicates to the world and who reveals himself through the wonders of the Old Testament. So people, certainly they did create gods. They carved little figures. Probably didn't look like this, but they carved little things. But throughout the whole of the Old Testament, there's admonitions and criticisms of the Jews for worshipping things that are nothing but just bits of wood, which that's what I believe that to be. So, in fact, the very fact that there is a criticism of that is a reflection of the strong monotheism, which is belief that there is only one God, and that's Jewish doctrine. Sure, their practice was that they worshipped other idols, worshipped other things at different points, but that was the reason that they were judged, or that they were actually in the wrong, because they didn't acknowledge that there was only one God. So Jewish doctrine asserts that there is only one God. And certainly by the time when we get to Jesus, that monotheism was extraordinarily strict within the Jewish.
You were saying that this was inconceivable. Well, it's obviously not inconceivable because they did that. So you're basing a lot of your argument on the fact that this is really doctrine.
You slightly misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not saying that they didn't believe that there were potentially other idols, but they were actually saying that God himself, that they can believe that a Jew, someone who believes within an understanding of Jewish thinking, would actually say that I stand in the place of God. That's essentially what Jesus said. So that's why, because the accusation against him is actually blasphemy. It's not idolatry. And so that's the crucial difference. But idolatry was still wrong. This certainly would have been. There are many times within Israel's history. That's why many times in the Old Testament documents they talk about people who have gone and worshipped these things, that they have done the wrong thing. So that's why, hence, they have a very strong monotheistic perception.
I'm just beseeching the audience to ask this question.
You can ask it, Steve. It's okay. You can ask it.
Robert said that the Jews have this God, and you have to believe them. Would somebody like to ask Robert why he believes the Jewish God, but he doesn't necessarily believe the Chinese gods, the Japanese gods, the Russian gods? Why would the Chinese, the Russians, the Andes people, the people from North America, the Australian Aboriginals, why would he dismiss those gods but hold the Jewish God with such reverence?
Well, the Indian gods, which this one's the Indian god.
Look, this God is awesome. Look, it's got many hands and a flute. I mean, this God beats them all.
Nice question. Balance of Cthulhu that you tell.
Yeah. Well, the question, that's an excellent question, and I thought I dealt with it in some of my presentations because of Revelation, because he has revealed himself in a way. Not only he's made a claim, but he's made he's done something which would justify that claim. And so I don't see if one of these other gods appeared and made claims which would be worthwhile investigating and worthwhile following, then sure you'd have to hold them. You'd have to at least accept that they were reasonable. But as far as I'm aware, there are no other accounts. As I said, not very many people in history have claimed to be God. And then secondly...
that's not true. Many people have claimed to be God.
Oh, really?
And they have suffered the death of ignominy, of being murdered because they had claimed to be a god.
And, that's right. And one of those people was...
And those people aren't around to say anything. And they didn't have followers. They're supposed to say,
So my basic answer to the question is because of revelation. Because of the... Well, I believe that the historical record is reasonable and trustworthy. And that I think there is good reason to believe that what he said is truth, and that Jesus has the exclusive claim to truth, or to the truth of two bodies.
All right, I want some time. I was promised time. That was a really good question about Jewish polytheism, because it's well established now that Jewish polytheism was rife and very early. Jewish monotheism is a later development. That's very well established in Old Testament studies. I don't think really anyone takes the Old Testament seriously anymore. I mean, Old Testament minimalism, I was talking about the Gospels now, unreliable data. Forget the Old Testament, that's just a complete mess. The Jews themselves think it's myth. The Catholics think it's myth. It's just a complete mess, and we definitely see a development there from polytheism through to henotheism, monolatrism, into monotheism. The idea of the one true God is actually a late Jewish development. The early Jews were polytheists, and their predecessors, the Canaanites, that's an interesting topic in itself, that the Jews were actually Canaanites. The Canaanites were also polytheists. And the interesting thing is that Yahweh was only one of the gods. And there's still remnants of this in the Bible. In the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, and incredibly it may be more reliable than the current Hebrew version of the Old Testament, because it's based on an even earlier Hebrew version. There's actually a few passages there that indicates that Yahweh is only one of about 70 gods, and that there will be 70 gods in charge of 70 regions of the earth. The God of Israel was Yahweh. What about all the other gods? It just so happens that Yahweh was exalted, replaced his father El, and now we've got monotheism. First monolatrism and then monotheism. So actually, Jewish polytheism, that is a thing. I mean, we know that. That is a fact. We can't get around that.
Which scholars say that?
All of them. Thompson is the leading figure for Old Testament minimalism. Everyone thought he was crazy back in the 70s, but now he's mainstream. Everyone's like, yeah, you were right all along. Sorry about all that.
Can I just ask a follow-up on something?
Yeah.
It's on the topic. You talk about Revelation,
Yeah.
you say one of the big things is that you believe evidence.
Can you just speak up so that
Can you repeat?
I'll repeat the question. Yeah.
One of the big things in your argument is you believe in God because God revealed himself.
Correct, that's right. That's
Okay.
That's okay.
My question, no.
I'll repeat it.
Okay. My question is actually to Raphael. Can you put in context why I find this really doubtful? To me, it seems like, because I can't put it in.
What's doubtful? That God revealed himself?
No, the argument that Robert's put forward, that one of the reasons he believes there's evidence of God is because God says he has revealed himself. I'm not a philosopher, but to me it sounds like saying I believe in God because it's true. I believe in something.
The question is, so my argument is about, I believe in God because he has revealed himself. So you're asking Raphael to sort of articulate that view because it sounds like I believe in God because he's real. Something like that.
Exactly. To me, it's not a sound argument.
Yeah.
If it's not a sound argument, can you explain why?
I don't like that approach because it sort of puts the cart before the horse. We don't have proof of God's being revealed. We have evidence of people making claims that a certain God revealed his or herself to them. We don't have any good evidence for any of the traditions. We're not going to privilege Christianity. And I think it's putting the cart before the horse because I think first we need to establish that God exists. And we tend to do that through philosophical argumentation, and I gave you a really brief rundown about how that actually fails. And then you can talk about what sort of God is it, so the God of theism, which we haven't established because there's all these alternatives like pantheisms, like Judaisms, like my favorite pandeism, there's also the polytheisms. Why not two gods, why not a threesome, why not four? And then when you've established, okay, it is theism, it is this God concept, then you can talk about, will this God reveal itself? If it's a deistic God, probably not. If it's a theistic God, then yes, you would expect God to reveal itself. But then there's questions about, would it reveal itself to us? Is it really about us? Is it about the ants? Is it about sheep? Is it some alien species? Is it about us in the past? Is it about us in the future? just as all this seemed to happen only a few thousand years ago when we've been around for a couple of 100,000 years, maybe what so-called happened a few thousand years ago didn't actually happen and the real revelation is coming in the future. That is a possibility. So we really need to try and figure out, is this so-called revelation accurate? And then you can tie that into miraculous claims, divine claims, and like what I was saying before, these claims have a low, high probability. And even the Christian and the theist has to accept that because they reject the claims of all the other faith traditions. So I'm not saying they have to accept that this didn't happen, but I'm saying they have to accept the low, high probability. The problem is, to overcome the low, high probability, you need a really good consequent probability. And it's even worse than that, because naturalistic theories also have high consequent probabilities. So you actually need, I call it a consequent probability differential, and I think it's kind of impossible to get there. That's what Hume is talking about, because the naturalistic theories are so likely, and there's a lot of evidence for them, natural theories of how religion come about. I sort of gave you a little taste of talking about Jewish polytheism. It's quite natural that you can actually move towards monotheism for certain political reasons, for example. So, yeah, I think it's putting the cart before the horse. You first need to know that it's difficult. I guess through philosophical argumentation, you can try and figure out if God exists, and then you can examine the claims for revelation. You can do it through the revelation, but you need really good evidence. And we haven't got really good evidence.
Can I respond?
Could you make it very brief because we have a lot of questions tonight?
No, it's fine. This is good. I'm very glad. Just want to, Raphael made one point which I completely agree with in terms of we do have, how do we know about who revelation is? People making claims, and that's what I was arguing tonight, that we do have someone who's made a claim, and I think given some evidence and reasons for why we should trust that claim. And in terms of the whole concept of probabilities, you've got to be careful about getting the cart before the horse and not assuming naturalism as your conclusion. So that's one of the things I think unfortunately Raphael's methodology allows him to do, is means that we have, because you're trying to give probabilities to naturalism by prejudicing to say, well, naturalism of course has a high probability, then you're going to get that as your conclusion. That's just the nature of probabilistic reasoning.
I specifically said I do not assume naturalism. I don't even need to talk about naturalism. We're just talking about low high probabilities.
But how do you get those probabilities? And that's precisely the probability for a miracle or things that occur. Then your whole system depends on the probabilities of those things being low.
I already explained that. I explained that.
You're really careful about getting the probability cart before the horse.
We just move on to the next question. David? You asked, yeah.
Before the universe was created by God, what was God doing? Just floating around. He said, I'll create the universe. Eventually humans, I'll put them through pain and suffering. But to relieve their pain and suffering, I'll ask them to believe in me, and they'll go to heaven. Is that what God intended?
So which question would you like me to answer? Would you like me to ask you what God was doing before He created, or what He did after He created? Everything. Yeah, brilliant. What have I got? 3 minutes, 2 minutes. I think, well, the whole question about what is God doing before He created? I mean, in many ways, it goes back to the whole idea, the whole concept of revelation. I only know anything about God if He reveals Himself to me. I can get a glimpse, and that's some of the things through like natural theology. I can get a bit of a glimpse of who God is, what He might be like. But what's He doing before the creation of the world? I can only know if He tells me. And so, in some respects, I mean, I'm just intrigued as to why that's an interesting question too. What are you particularly? What are you trying to?
What's His intention?
What's the intention before for creating or before the universe?
Why put us through pain and suffering? What's His intention?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm not entirely sure all of the reasons, and I don't claim to know those reasons because, again, I don't think He's told us all of the reasons. But I think one of the reasons that He has He has created the world the way He does is so that He can demonstrate His love to us. So, because He would take the pain and suffering on Himself so that He could bring us into a relationship with Him.
I just want to piggyback on that one. It sort of brought up the problem of evil, gratuitous suffering. That's another pretty good argument against theism. When we're talking about, forget naturalism, let's just talk about the alternative isms, the alternative God concepts. We can think of, would a God that's all good permit this gratuitous evil? You think that's not that expected. It's not impossible, so we can forget about the logical argument for evil. But we can talk about the evidential argument from evil. And we would say, you know what, this presence of gratuitous suffering, this gratuitous evil in the world is more expected on maybe a pretty evil God, not an all-good God, or a morally indifferent God, or a God that's only part-way good. So there's already another few concepts on that bit of evidence are more probable than theism.
Ask Raphael a question on evil.
Just before you did this, gentleman, was just first, you're a Christian?
What was your question, young Christian man?
Yours coming from a Christian perspective?
Yeah, both. It's not either side. So it's
Okay, we're just looking for a Christian perspective question, if we may. Just
Yeah,
break
this
things
one
up.
is, and it's directed just directly on what Raphael just
Sure,
said.
please, Peter.
So very intrigued that you were arguing about whether God would, create a world with evil or not. But do you believe in evil?
Do I believe in evil?
Yeah.
I don't know if it exists or not.
So
I don't know if objective morality, objective evil exists. I do think there is gratuitous suffering. That's usually what philosophers are talking about when they talk about the argument for
Okay,
evil.
so therefore, the question, why would a good loving God allow evil and suffering to exist, only makes sense if you assume in the existence of a good loving God. If you assume that there is no God, the question falls away, because there is no such thing as evil. There's no such thing as right or wrong. So the very fact that you're asking the question means that you are actually dealing with a world view in which you believe if there's a God, he has to be a good, loving, or powerful.
That's incorrect. I gave you about 5 gods that are actually more probable based on that argument. I did not assume that there was no
So
God.
then why are you worried about the problem with evil?
I'm not worried about it. I think it's a good argument against theism because it makes
Why?
other.
Because you don't believe evil exists.
I just explained that. No, it's gratuitous suffering.
What's the difference?
That is more consistent
What
on
is suffering?
alternative
What
God
is suffering
concepts.
when we're just made of atoms?
What is life?
That's getting a bit silly now.
No, that's not a very good question.
And if
It's a
we-
crucial question.
Is God made of atoms?
Philosophers have established
Sorry,
there is
Raphael,
gratuitous suffering. Excuse me? Philosophers have really established that there is gratuitous suffering. You say what suffering, I guess we can ask that of anything. Suffering can be described as pain, it can be described as loneliness, and whatever you want to label it, you can say, well, this thing that is unpleasant is not as expected on the concept of an all-good God that loves us. It is more expected on the concept of a God that's a bit of a jerk. So the idea is not that God doesn't exist. The idea with this is that there are alternative concepts that are more probable.
You're missing
that make
the point.
evidence
You're missing
more
no, sorry, I
likely.
just need to respond.
No,
You're
I'm
missing
sorry,
the basic point.
that's probably long enough.
No, the basic point is
No,
you
I
say
think,
that
Peter,
you say suffering and loneliness is bad.
Peter, with due respect, you've had your time. There are a lot of questions tonight, Nat.
Okay.
I'd like to drift the argument slightly. So I'm not going to talk about probabilities and naturalistic view. But correct me if I'm wrong. You seem to base your argument on God revealing Himself. Are you saying that He revealed Himself personally to you, or revealed Himself at the point of history
It's a very good question.
to the majority of people?
Thank you. I'd say that.
I didn't ask the question yet, so
Oh, so just
just
a
making
question
sure
you're
that. Yeah, I'm just making sure that I'm addressing the right point.
Sure.
So are you talking personally, or are you talking about historically?
I'd say both, but I'm not entirely sure what you mean. That's what I just wanted to clarify.
So to be brief, my question is, for example, and this is just as an example, Muhammad claimed to have a miracle called Isra al-Mi'raj, which is apparently he went to heaven and he saw heaven and he came back in a millisecond. Okay? From a scholarly view, this has been multiply attested, mentioned in a number of books, gathered by a number of early Islamic scholars, like Abu Bakr al-Razi, for example. And I would like to know, do you believe that Muhammad went to heaven and saw the heaven and had such a revelation and he saw actually the throne of God or whatever? Or, if you don't believe in that one, although it is multiply attested and mentioned by scholars, then why would you trust Matthew, Mark, and Luke, or whoever, early Christian traditions and writers, that Jesus existed and Jesus had miracles and Jesus God revealed himself in Jesus.
So just maybe I can ask just a quick response. So do you believe that Muhammad did that?
I personally don't believe in either.
Okay, why don't you believe? I mean, you've presented a fairly good case for why we should believe Muhammad.
Because I cannot trust people's view.
question. You really need to answer the question.
I'm happy to answer the question. Sure. Okay.
I personally don't
But if
believe
you just
this
presented a
because
fairly
you don't know to what extent you believe writings.
Sure.
You haven't attended the actual event.
Thank you, yes.
So in that sense, I'm asking you, why would you believe in a bunch of writings and not believe in a bunch of writings, even though they both agree to the same criteria of evidence?
Thank you for the question. Just to make it clear, I think that there is a difference between the nature of the revelations between the two. One of them is, when you say multiply attested, I'm not, well, unless correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not entirely sure that anybody else was able to verify Muhammad actually going to heaven or not. Did anyone disappear and then return?
Did actually anyone verified that Jesus did convert wine to water to
Well, that's the difference, you see. I think because there were eyewitnesses to that. That's the key difference between the two. See, no one has seen Muhammad. It could be, I mean, I think that if you want to argue from a naturalistic perspective, the most natural response to that is that it's kind of happened in his head. That he's gone to heaven, come back, had this vision, written it down, and shared it with others. The difference between Jesus' revelation, though, is that it's actually happened like here. There was a paralytic that was raised to life. Water was turned into wine. People saw it. Thought,
that's what the books say.
That's right.
It doesn't mean that the event actually happened in public.
No, that's right. That raises a prior question as to what convinced the people to write the words of the books.
Gentlemen, we'll call back.
So that's the key difference between the two.
The gentleman with the spectacles with the structure.
Yeah, thank you. Raphael, do you really believe in your heart that we evolved from monkeys?
No. Next question.
So you don't believe we evolved from monkeys?
I don't think we evolved from monkeys. No, next question.
So, this one's for both speakers. So Robert, you started with the best rhetorical question. What would it take for you to come to believe in Abraham and God or Jesus in particular?
Or just a God, yeah.
So I guess my question, and this is for both speakers, so what would it take for you to adopt your opponent's position? In other words, Robert, what would it take for you to cease to believe in the Abrahamic God or at least come to believe that it's more likely than not that there is no such thing, such being firm? And similarly, Raphael, what would it take for you? Because Robert sort of gave these bunch of quotes to people. I think they might have been a bit straw man, no offense. But what does an actual non-believer? What would it take, Raphael?
Robert, do you want to go first? I just want to address briefly the point about straw man. I'm not entirely sure I understand that point because these were actually, this is what I heard. This is the natural testimony. So you can not believe what I said, but they were actually people who told me that they won't believe. I can recount more stories of people who said, even if God appeared to me now, I still won't believe. But anyway, in terms of falsifying my position,
Can I clarify something? First of all, it's not a big deal. It's just that I think there's sort of a bigger picture of what they're probably something more than that, and you kind of use that. At least I think that will happen. But again, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I just wanted to clarify. I mean, I hate straw men. I really. Let's keep the straw men and Wizard of Oz. I think that's probably the best place for there to be. In terms of what would falsify my position, well, the clearest thing would be to demonstrate that the resurrection of Jesus didn't happen. That's the clearest thing, because if that's what Christianity stands or falls on, is the resurrection of Jesus. Now, I've used to think about that. I thought that would turn me to an atheist. I've been convinced that just our experience of the world makes better sense within a sort of atheistic conception of the world. But in order, I would very happily, well, not happily, but I would leave the Christian faith if it was demonstrated beyond reasonable doubt that the resurrection didn't happen. I've read it. There's a lot of notes in there. I've read it.
It's interesting about what it would take for me to believe. I have 4 quick things to say on that. First of all, it's not my job to get the theist and to design the experiments for the theist. Second of all, I don't know is a perfectly acceptable answer. Third of all, even if I didn't know what it would take to convince me, I think there's someone that would know. I think, don't you think? There's someone up there that would know what it would take to convince a very skeptical, rational person like myself. And so because they're all good and they want me to be saved, and they know that I'm honest, I haven't closed my heart to Christianity or anything like that, they would be able to do so. That they haven't done so, it's kind of a problem. Number 4, there is something that would convince me. If Robert were to get a room full of amputees, say 50 of them, pray for them in the name of Jesus, and within 10 seconds, if they were healed in just 1 minute, I would be pretty darn impressed. That would do it. Are there any amputees in the audience tonight?
Would you like to be?
Do we have any ice as well? I'll make fresh.
Just a question to you, Robert.
Yeah, sure.
All the gods throughout history seem to reflect the physical and mental attitudes of the time. For example, the Egyptian gods reflect the physical characteristics, the long-nosed, hand-skinned animals. And in the case of Christianity, it reflects strongly the mentality of the time: slavery, misogyny, sexism, brutality. Now, how is it if God is universal, he only seems to apply to a certain time period? Now, aside from saying it's metaphorical, how do you justify that?
Well, that's how many seconds do I have to answer that question? I mean, buried within your question are a number of assumptions which I would dispute. So I would actually suggest that, in fact, that one of the reasons for the success of Western culture is because the Christian conception of God is actually translatable to multiple contexts and multiple cultures, and it's not rooted in one particular time and space. Unlike, for example, Islam. So the whole concept of Islam is you have to create Sharia law wherever Islam goes. Christian conceptions of understanding, Christian understanding of God can be translated to multiple contexts, multiple cultures, and multiple places. That's my basic answer.
I'd just like to answer that. Christianity is a lot older than Islam. It's had the chance to adapt to the scientific world of today.
Yep.
Islam's still in that world where it's still definite with violence and slavery.
Yep.
But I'll let you move on to the next question.
No, but we're just responding to that. But that misunderstands the absolutely fundamentals of both thought systems. That Islam, by its very nature, is inherently tied to a political system. So it can't, wherever it goes, it must dominate culture. Whereas Christianity, it hasn't. As I said, the very fact of the Western success is a result of the very nature of Christianity being flexible and being able to adapt to circumstances.
It's my understanding that Raph started life as a Christian, you started life as an atheist.
Well, that's
somewhat.
Born atheist?
Well, yeah. I haven't.
So then if you were born atheist, then what made you change for both of them? And what made you change?
To full disclosure, that's Steve's understanding, importing a view of anthropology, that he suggested everyone's born atheist, which I think there's evidence to suggest that's disputed, but we won't go into that.
Is that your...
No, I grew up in a Christian home, but I have certainly entertained atheism very seriously at different points in my life.
Is your point that you became Christian or you were born Christian?
I don't think anyone's... Sorry, every Christian is born, they're born again in a second sense. No one is brought up in a Christian home and therefore automatically Christian. Everyone has to make some sort of intellectual assent at some point to the Christian message. There's no such thing as a Christian child. I think is a misnomer.
So that means you have to choose Christianity, correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, then what made you choose Christianity?
As I've outlined today, the evidence for Jesus. To me, I've been convinced. Ironically, it was actually Richard Dawkins who helped me convinced, because I read his book, The God Delusion, and that really shook what I believed about everything. So I was forced to reevaluate certain things, and I went very hard into looking at the evidence of the resurrection, and I realised that the arguments that unfortunately Dawkins had raised were unpersuasive, and there's actually good reason to believe it actually happened.
So then at what point did you choose Christianity? If you're saying you read The God Delusion, and that affected your point of choosing Christianity, when did you choose Christianity?
Not
because you're saying you weren't
sure.
born. You said we aren't born Christian, or we aren't born.
We're not born Christian.
So, and you said we choose a point to become Christian, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. And then you based your saying that I chose to become Christian after reading God Delusion and making my understand
Well, I was Christian before that. It shook my presuppositions. It confirmed me in what I believe. I suppose that's my point. It was when I was a teenager, I suppose, when I really accepted the Christian message.
We might just move on to Raphael's answer so that we can get on with that question.
So, how I became an atheist from being Christian? Number one, I read the Bible. And number two, I was training to become an apologist. So I wanted to find out what is the evidence for this. I've always just assumed it. I want to find out what's the evidence, and then I realized there isn't any.
So in conclusion,
So we'll just move on to the next question.
I was just wondering, you base a lot of your evidence for God on evidence of Jesus.
Correct.
But you're using a logical fallacy there. You're basically saying in the Lord Buddhist liar.
Sorry.
That,
I'm just getting
sorry.
groovy tunes to the
In the argument of Lord Buddhist liar,
correct.
You're saying option A is implausible, option B is implausible, therefore option C by default must be correct. And there's a lot of evidence coming from that. That's a logical fallacy. I can think of quite a few other options for why Jesus might have thought he was God and other people at the time might have thought he was God than Lord Buddhist liar. So I was wondering what your rebuttal to that logical fallacy would be in terms of the weight of evidence.
I'm not entirely sure that it's a logical fallacy because there can, assuming that Jesus actually said it, which I think I presented reasonable reasons to believe that he did, then there really can only be three options. As I said, he was wrong and he knew it. He was wrong and he didn't know it. They're the only two options, or he was right. I can't see that there's only three logical options. I can't see where the fallacy
There is
is.
that he didn't say it at all.
Sorry?
There is that he didn't say it at all. That's on fourth option.
No, that's what I mean. I'm assuming that he did say. That's what I said. And with that assumption, they're the only three logical options.
It's based on a pre-assumption.
Well, there's reasonable belief. I think there's reasonable evidence to believe that he did say it.
See wins by what you're saying that that's completely correct, but particularly at the time, being a political instrument, there's lots of other things around that. I feel like you're basing the weight of your evidence on quite a thin layer.
Well, yes and no. There's and certainly that's thin. I just think it's the best explanation. In order to make those assumptions, you've got to say, okay, well, give me some evidence. Explain to me why he could be a puppet. For what? As I said, for what reason and who would have created him? And this is a recent argument. Someone said that he was actually the whole Jesus thing was invented by the Romans. I'm not entirely sure why, but the argument just falls down to the level of implausibility. Who would create it and for what purpose? They're the questions you've got to answer. If you can provide plausible reasons for that, then those options become live. Until you can unless you can provide good reasons for that, then I can't see why you can't go with the third option of mass reason. Because it best explains all the data. That's inference is the best explanation.
The gentleman back was coming from a Christian perspective. Did you want to ask a question? Right, you sir.
I'm coming from
Thank you. That's good.
Okay, maybe part of that conversation is a battle of our perceptions of what God may look like. Our concept of God is not this, now I'm being that God, now I'm being nothing. Okay. Before our concepts exist in our history, right to today, take away all that, would it leave a thought of possibly might be an existence of, not God in our concept today, but existence of non-physical form of energy, just energy, call it energy, non-physical, energy, life, presence, being. I'm just trying to describe a non-physical existence before, whether it be creation or not. Would that be a possibility of existence of life, just life?
Yes, that is a very real possibility. That sounds quite pantheistic. I think that's more probable because it doesn't posit that there's something other. It's not something transcendent. It's something that's simply everywhere. It's also it sounds very scientific. It sounds sort of a bit like quantum mechanics, and there are actually quite a few scientists that do think that there is some sort of a pantheistic God. Whether you want to call it God is up to you, but there are quite a few people that do think there is some substance there. I think it's possible. I don't necessarily accept it. As I said, I'm a de facto naturalist, but I think it's more plausible. I think it's a possibility.
You accept it from naturalist. I don't understand the naturalist point of view. How would you describe the naturalist point of view compared to
The question is, what's a naturalist point of view?
That is a very good question. It's a very tricky one to answer, and it makes even defining what the supernatural is a very difficult thing to do, because you can argue, well, if that thing exists, is that not part of the natural world? So it's very, very difficult to do. I think it's up to each philosopher actually to define those terms, and they do. That's what philosophers do. That's why there's a lot of arguments over what words mean. And one way to look at naturalism is basically that there's nothing divine. There's only the natural world pretty much as we see it. But you could also argue for what you're talking about, some sort of a pantheistic energy out there, and argue, well, that's an interesting worldview as well. So it really depends on the individual argument.
Just a quick question to both of you. Robert, you go on about the evidence for Jesus. I presume you're referring to the Bible. Could I ask both of you to define the evidence for Jesus, and is there any document, real evidence that exists outside of the Bible?
Your question assumes that the Bible isn't evidence.
No, let's put that. I'm not assuming. You're assuming it's evidence. I'm saying to you, I mean, Mr. Tinkle sits in a book, and Mr. Tinkle's not real. So, if the Bible, put that aside, is there any documented evidence? There's a lot of Roman records of the actual existence of Jesus. They had census, they had all sorts of other things going on. Because my understanding is nothing was written about him for the first 100 years. So
except all the things that were written about it. Well, if you want to discount that.
Until then, that's what I'm asking. What was written in his lifetime that was documented?
What was written about what, sorry?
Jesus during his lifetime. Roman records, whatever. Is there any documented evidence that he actually existed?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, well, at one level, there's an assumption built into that question that the records that we have from the New Testament are not actually evidence. Because we've got to remember, even if we step away and just say, okay, I'm not going to believe this Jesus thing, there are these documents that emerge in history which we have to explain.
Can we put the New Testament aside?
No, but we can't. That's the point. It's the most crucial document that we have in understanding about who Jesus is. Just in terms of, there's also inbuilt an assumption that only contemporary documents written at the time count. If you want to consider, for example,
the reason I say that is I can't remember what I ate last week for lunch.
Sure.
You can't ask me to document something that's happened in my lifetime that was handed down over memory. I just won't buy that at all. Our human brain is not designed for that.
No.
So that's why I'm asking you. Please put the Bible aside. Is there any other evidence?
The evidence we have for Hannibal crossing the Alps, the first documentary evidence for that, in fact the first evidence we have at all that even used elephants, was written 70 years after the event. Do we question that Hannibal led across the Alps?
I'm not familiar with it. I can't answer your question.
Well, no serious historian doubts that Hannibal led across the Alps. My point is that just because something wasn't written within the week, or it wasn't on YouTube or something, they didn't have YouTube back then, so just because something wasn't written that early doesn't mean that we can't discount it. In fact, there are many historical records about Hannibal crossing the Alps which are written 2, 3, 4 centuries later, which are still regarded as primary sources.
Is there any other evidence? Can you just answer yes or no? Are you aware of any other documented evidence?
Yes, sir.
There's several, but yeah, there's Tacitus, there's Josephus, and there's a few other first century and even hostile sources that reference Jesus.
So I ask our scholar, he knows the talking quote me.
Sure. One part of your question was what's the contemporary evidence for Jesus? Zero. We've got no contemporary evidence for Jesus.
As is the contemporary evidence for Hannibal.
We've got the Gospels that are decades later.
As the evidence for Hannibal. This is a really important question about historical method.
With due respect, we don't build churches to Hannibal.
So we don't have any contemporary evidence for Jesus. We do have contemporary evidence for Caesar, Julius Caesar. We've got coins with his face on. These are the sorts of evidences that you can use to establish a person's historicity, for example. Yeah, we have contemporary evidence of figures like Julius Caesar. We have none for Jesus. Now, when it comes to the historicity of Jesus, that can be a bit iffy to go down that path. But when it comes to the biblical Jesus, that is very surprising that we don't have a single contemporary reference to Jesus. Because we're talking about someone that was much more interesting and much more important than Julius Caesar. And we don't have any contemporary evidence. It's like no one thought, I'm going to record this. until decades later. That's very, very surprising when we're talking about the biblical Jesus or the Christ of faith.
I'm just going to ask the audience a question, if I may. In the Gospels, there was a blind man that came to Jesus. And one of the Gospels said that Jesus spoke to the man and then he could see. Another one of the Gospels said that he laid his hand on the blind man and he could see. The other one said that he spat in his eye. Now we've got a very esteemed ophthalmologist in our presence this evening, and apart from a humble optometrist, but we're going to ask the esteemed ophthalmologist, Dr. Tony Maloof, what would happen if somebody spat in another person's eye?
It's transmission of disease, which would be quite significant, viral, bacterial, and other. I don't know what the type of disease were around then, but I can suspect they were quite significant. There's no reason in history that we can suspect there weren't disease. So that's the first problem. There could be chemicals in spittle. Generally, you probably wouldn't go blind and you certainly would get cured straight away. We use blood to cure the surface of the eye and it doesn't do much. So, as a therapeutic effect, very little. As a transmission disease effect, not significant.
Thank you. And what if you were to put spit into the ground, into clay, and put that clay in somebody's eye? What would that do to the eye?
Yeah, the Kanaks in French Polynesia do that all the time. And in fact, they do it as a therapeutic option. And what we see the disastrous side effects of that, which are usually loss of the eye from serious infection. You wouldn't want to do it, and you wouldn't want to have it done to you. It certainly is a therapeutic. Mechanical, chemical, bacterial, viral, all sorts of toxins.
So you as an ophthalmologist wouldn't look to one of those cures for your patients, disease patients, let alone a blind patient.
It was written in a record as a therapeutic revolution.
Thank you. Tell me. Next question, thank you. Sorry, go ahead. Who hasn't asked a question?
Sorry, I may have misunderstood it, but just going back, and you were talking about Islam and Christianity, and talking about Islam as a political religion,
correct,
also than Christianity. Yet we've got Vatican City, which is its own country, and one of the most, I suppose, the most impressive financial states in the world, and I can't see how that could be any more political.
No, I can take the point. The question is about that's the question.
That was sort of a question of clarifying that.
So the question was, when you're talking about political systems, the Vatican is one of the most massive financial institutions in the world. It's a political institution. How does that vary? Is that correct?
Yeah, well, your claim was that
can I just respond to that quickly? Because the answer is fairly straightforward, and so that's okay if I can.
Yeah, I just like there's sort of a part two to that.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, as I don't think there's a softer side to the Christianity that we've come from, and not so long ago, where people like my grandmother couldn't get a divorce even though she was beaten by her husband every day. That was against the religion. She was excommunicated from the church, from the family, from everything. So how is that sort of softer, or in a better way, less political, or less
Well, first, I'm very, very sorry to hear your family story. That's very unfortunate. But the point I was making is a broader point, which is about the relationship between each religious philosophy and politics, and the political system. So Islam, by its definition, must control the politics, otherwise it's not truly Islam. That's what Islam means, submission. And so it means that we need, if we want to bring in Islam into Australia or wherever, then we must follow this certain legal system. Christianity can exist in multiple different forms. Sometimes it has in the past, and I'm happy, I will say I'm sorry that the church has failed in many ways. And I think partly because of the connection between the church and power, political power. My point is, you can still live in a Christian understanding of the world without having control of the political system or the political process. That's the difference between a Christian understanding. In fact,
that's just less obvious.
No, it's quite clear. You read, for example, the book of 1 Peter, it makes it very clear about how believers are to live as sojourners and exiles in the world, right? Aliens and sojourners. So we're not actually part of this world, which means that in many ways, the Christian understanding of the world is not that we will dominate, or the Christians will dominate the political process, but due to circumstances of history and of opportunity or whatever happened, the church often has controlled large parts of the political process. But Christianity can still exist if it doesn't. Islam, true Islam, can't exist if it doesn't control the political process. That's the difference between the two.
Ladies and gentlemen, what we might do is, it is getting late, so we're going to, Raphael, did you just want to respond to that? Just before Raphael chooses to or not chooses to, once Raphael chooses or not chooses to answer that question, we will have a 3-minute summary by each party, and then if people are wanting to hang around and ask questions later, we'll do that. It's just that I'd like it not to be impolite, that people feel that they need to leave and make our speakers uncomfortable. So Raphael, I'll leave that to you.
I think I should just play, especially given my position, I think I should just play devil's advocate and say that I don't think Muslims around the world would appreciate being told what a true Muslim is. Just as much as many Christians would not appreciate being told what a true Christian is. I don't think we can do that.
Ladies and gentlemen, I do apologise about the music next door. It's not really what I expected. We do expect to have a sound system, if not at the next talk, then certainly the one after. But the next talk, I'll announce a little bit later, but the fellow pipe bellows, so there shouldn't be a problem. Now, we might have our summation, if we may, so 3 minutes for Robert.
Well, thanks very much, everyone, for putting up with me tonight, or putting me up, or whatever it is. I do appreciate the questions, and I'm very grateful for your questions and comments. Matt Dillahunty, I had lunch with him earlier this year, and he said the question of the existence of God is the most important question that anyone can ever answer. So thank you for gathering here tonight to discuss this really most important question. Matt also, the thing that Matt lamented in that discussion was that most people in the world don't discuss, or certainly in Australia, don't discuss this question with as much rigour and as thought as they should. So I want to say thank you for asking very difficult questions, very good questions. And I hope in some minor way perhaps that I've offered some suggestions for well, certainly how I think about the universe and about the world, about how God really is there. So tonight's topic, as I said, is God really there? And I think that there's good reasons to believe that He really is. One of the things we do need to be careful of in our analysis of this situation is we need to be careful against hyper-skepticism. That we are so skeptical that I'm not even going to let whatever is in front of me speak to me. So I remember reading last year The Wind in the Willows to my now 8-year-old boy. And in that there's a point there where Ratty and Mole get stuck in a snowstorm. And they're looking around and they're thinking, how are we going to get out of this? How are we going to get out of this? And they stumble across a door scraper. And Rat says, oh look, it's a door scraper. You know what that means, doesn't it? And Mole says, no, I don't understand what it means at all. And he says, who could possibly put that there? It's such an inconvenience. And then they stumble across a doormat. And Rat says excitedly, do you know what this means, don't you? And Mole says, of course, someone's left a doormat in the middle of the forest. Who would be so stupid to do that? But in the end, they actually uncover, Rat knows exactly what he's doing. He opens up, finds the door, and uncovers the sign that says, Mr. Badger. He's found what they were looking for, which was they were looking for Badger's house for safety. So my question is, sometimes we can assess evidence from different perspectives. One of us can say that it leads us to Mr. Badger. Others may just dismiss it as being, well, this doesn't fit my preconception of reality. So my suggestion is that we need to be careful about hyper-skepticism. I think there's very good reasons to believe that God is there, and I think the best reasons are that Jesus reveals Him. To me, the reality of God is a crucially important question. But if it's true that His existence is not the most important question, Jesus just didn't come and say, hi, I'm God, just letting you know that I'm here. He came because He loved us, and He wanted a relationship with us. There's very good evidence to suggest that Jesus was real. I appreciate the suggestion about the historical method, which I think is very important. And if we examine the historical Jesus, compare him with other historical figures, I think we'll find that the evidence is quite extraordinary. Sure, we don't have any coins with Jesus, but I'm not sure if we would expect it with a penniless preacher from Nazareth. Thank you very much for putting up with me. I just want to finally say that I know that God, and I believe that God is really there because He is here. Thank you very much.
Alright, I'll keep this short and sweet. I don't think I heard a coherent argument for theism's probability or Christian theism, so there wasn't really much to refute on that side. As for alternatives to theism, I think I gave quite a few plausible alternatives, such as naturalism, various pantheisms, deism, the evil God, the slightly good God, and so forth. And I gave reasons for why they're actually more probable based on them being more expected, based on the evidence. We heard no refutation of that. That's it, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, just before I do wind up, I don't mean to wind up the speakers, but just wind up the evening. I'd just like to talk about next month. Next month we have our very own Thomas Craven. I might ask Thomas to stand up. Handsome young gentleman he is, with his lovely partner. Next month we'll have our very own Thomas, who holds a master's degree in aerospace engineering. Can't looks be deceiving. As a researcher for NASA, the Princeton University's Electric Propulsion and Plasma Dynamics Laboratory, Thomas was actively involved in the development of non-conventional space thruster systems before returning down-to-earth devices like gas turbines and steam turbines for power generation. In his talk, Thomas will outline the challenges and technological hurdles which we will need to overcome in order to reach other solar systems or even alien galaxies. So that's something to really look forward to. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a great pleasure to have our debaters, Robert from all the way down in Melbourne and closer to home, Raphael. It certainly has been a very entertaining evening. We don't necessarily agree with everything that one or both of the speakers have said tonight, but look, it was all in good nature, and I thank you very much for participating as speakers and for the audience. Cheers.